If you were sitting across from me right now, I'd ask you one question before I told you any of this. What would you do if the person who was supposed to love you unconditionally looked at your pain and decided it was an inconvenience? Because 3 weeks ago I was lying on a hospital gurney with a broken collarbone, a concussion, and a phone that kept going to voicemail. And the one person I needed, the one person whose number I called first before the ambulance even arrived, sent me a text that I have read probably 100 times since then. I'm in the middle of a closing. Can't step away. You'll be okay. That was it. No call back. No, I'm coming. No, which hospital. Just you'll be okay. And here's the thing. I was okay. Eventually. But what happened after that text? What I found out in the weeks that followed? What unraveled the moment I stopped pretending that message was acceptable? That cost him everything. Not metaphorically, literally. The business, the reputation, the house he'd been so proud of, all of it. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it actually started. My name is Lena. I'm 31 years old and I work in commercial interior design. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, with my dad, my mom, and my younger brother, Kobe. We weren't a perfect family, nobody is, but we were solid. Dad coached Kobe's Little League. Mom made Sunday dinners that lasted 3 hours. I remember believing, genuinely believing, that our family was the kind that held together. Then I turned 16 and my parents divorced. I'm not going to get into all of it because that's a whole other story. What matters is that my dad remarried fast. 18 months after the divorce was finalized, he had a new wife. Her name was Simone, and she was 42 years old with 2 adult kids of her own, a sharp sense of humor, and an even sharper sense of what she wanted from my father. She was never outright cruel to me. That would have been easier to name. She was the kind of person who spoke in tones. A slight cooling of her voice when I walked in the room. A subject change when I brought up a memory involving my mom. A way of looking at my dad when I called that made him suddenly very busy, very important, too distracted to talk. I watched my dad become a different person slowly. Not all at once. Just incrementally. Less available. Less present. Less mine. By the time I was 25 and working in Raleigh, we'd fallen into a rhythm that looked like a relationship, but mostly wasn't. Dinner twice a year. Texts on birthdays. He'd ask about work and I'd tell him and he'd say, "That's great, honey," in the voice he used when he was already thinking about something else. It hurt. I won't pretend it didn't. But I'd also built a life that didn't require him to be in it the way he used to be. I had my apartment, my job, my friends. I had Kobe, who never stopped being my brother, even when our family stopped being a family. I told myself I was fine. Most days I almost believed it. The accident happened on a Tuesday in February. It was raining, that heavy, gray February rain that makes everything feel slightly apocalyptic. I was driving back from a site visit in Durham, 40 minutes outside of Raleigh, and a truck ran a red light on Highway 70 and hit the passenger side of my car so hard that I spun twice and ended up in a ditch. I remember the sound first, then the stillness after. Then I looked down and my left arm was at an angle that arms don't naturally go, and I understood, very calmly, that something was very wrong. The ambulance came. Paramedics. A hospital in 20 minutes. And somewhere in the chaos of being lifted onto a stretcher, I called my dad. Not because I expected him to fix anything, not because I needed him to be there in any logistical sense. I called him because I was scared and I wanted my father. It's that simple and that embarrassing. I was 31 years old and I wanted my dad. He didn't pick up. I left a voicemail. I said, "Dad, I've been in a car accident. I'm okay, but I'm going to the hospital. I wanted to tell you." Then I called Kobe, who answered on the second ring, said, "I'm leaving right now," and drove 45 minutes in the rain to sit with me in the emergency room. My dad texted at 4:17 p.m. "I'm in the middle of a closing. Can't step away. You'll be okay." I showed the text to Kobe. He read it and didn't say anything for a moment. Then he set my phone face down on the hospital tray table, and he said, Do you want me to call him? I said no. I typed back, okay. And I meant it the way you mean it when you've just decided something you haven't put into words yet. The way okay is actually a door closing very quietly. The diagnosis was a fractured clavicle, a grade 2 concussion, and soft tissue damage to my left shoulder. No surgery. Sling for 6 weeks. Physical therapy after. I was discharged the next morning. My dad called at 9 a.m., a full 16 hours after my voicemail. He said he was so sorry, he hadn't realized how serious it was. The closing had been months in the making. I understood how that went, right? I said yes. I said I was fine. I said we'd talk soon. I did not say what I was thinking, which was, you didn't call me back to find out how serious it was. You texted me one sentence and went back to your lunch. What he does, my dad. He's a real estate developer. Has been for 25 years. He built his firm, Hargrove and Associates, from a small 2-person operation into something that by last year had closed over $40 million in commercial deals in the Triangle area. He is very good at what he does. He is very proud of what he has built. He has spent the last decade rebuilding that business after the recession and the divorce. And Simone, who came from money and had connections my dad had always wanted, had been, by everyone's account, instrumental in the company's second act. What I didn't know until 6 weeks after my accident was that instrumental didn't begin to cover it. My friend Dara called me on a Thursday evening in March. Dara and I had gone to NC State together, and after graduation she'd gone into property management. She knew people in the Raleigh real estate world. She knew people who knew my dad. She said, Lena, I need to tell you something and I need you to just sit down first, okay? I sat down. She told me that she'd been in a meeting that week with a client who was in an active dispute with Hargrove and Associates, and in the course of that meeting documents had come up. Financial documents, and Dara, who is smart and careful and noticed things, had seen something that didn't make sense to her. She said, I think Simone has been moving money. I didn't understand at first. Moving money where? Moving it how? Dara explained as clearly as she could. It appeared that Simone, who had taken on an official financial operations role at Hargrove and Associates 3 years ago, had been systematically routing commission fees through a secondary LLC, one that my dad appeared to have no knowledge of, and redirecting a portion of those funds into accounts in her name alone. How much money are we talking about? I asked. Dara said she didn't know exactly, but based on what she'd seen, and the timeline of the transactions, she thought it could be significant. Significant. I held that word in my mouth for a long moment. Does my dad know? I asked. That's what I don't know, Dara said. Either he doesn't know, or he does know and he's hoping no one else finds out. I hung up with her and sat in my apartment for a long time without turning on any lights. Here is what I want to be honest about. My first instinct was to call my dad. Even then, even after the text message, even after 16 years of incremental absence, some part of me wanted to call him and say, do you know what's happening in your own company? And give him the chance to be shocked and horrified and grateful that I'd found out. I sat with that instinct long enough to examine it, and then I put it aside. Because the truth was, I didn't know if he knew. And if he didn't know, telling him would give Simone the chance to cover it up before it could be properly documented. And if he did know, if my dad was complicit in this, then I was the last person he would want to hear from. Either way, calling him wasn't the right move. I called a lawyer instead. A woman named Catherine who had been referred to me by a colleague at my firm. I told her what Dara had told me, and I asked her what she thought. Catherine said, if what your friend saw is accurate, and if it occurred within the scope of fiduciary responsibility, you're looking at potential fraud and breach of duty claims. The question is whether there's documentation. There was documentation. Dara had photos of the documents on her phone because she'd been confused and photographed them to review later. She sent them to me. I sent them to Catherine. Catherine spent 2 weeks reviewing everything. Then she connected with the client whose dispute had surfaced the documents in the first place. That client, it turned out, had suspected something was wrong for months and had already hired a forensic accountant. By the time the forensic accountant's full report came out in April, the number had a shape. Simone had been redirecting funds for approximately 4 years. The total was slightly over $3 million. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst of it was what the investigation found when they dug into the secondary LLC Simone had used. She had registered it with a silent partner, someone who had also been receiving a portion of the redirected funds. The silent partner was a man named Garrett who, when Dara heard his name and did some quiet digging of her own, turned out to be someone Simone had been involved with before she married my dad. And, based on some other things the investigation uncovered, I'm going to be careful here because I know how this part sounds. I know it sounds like a story. Too neat, too dramatic. The kind of thing that happens in movies and not in the parking lots of real estate firms in Raleigh, North Carolina. But I have the documents. Catherine has the documents. The forensic accountant's report is real, and the numbers in it are real, and what happened next was very, very real. In May, my dad was contacted by investigators. Not because I reported him, I didn't. The client's dispute had already triggered a formal audit before I was ever in the picture. What my involvement did was accelerate the timeline and provide documentation that connected Simone's LLC to the larger pattern of fraud. My dad called me on a Sunday night. I hadn't spoken to him since March, when I'd called to say I was doing better after the accident. And he'd said good, that was good. He sounded broken. That's the only word. Flat and broken, like someone had taken the person I knew and removed something essential from inside him. He said, "You knew." I said, "I found out. There's a difference." He said, "Lena." I said, "Dad, I need you to listen to me right now. Did you know?" There was a long silence. And then he said, "No. I didn't know about the accounts. I didn't know about the accounts. I didn't know about Garrett." I believed him. I don't know if that makes me naive. But I knew my dad, even the version of him he'd become, and there are some things you can hear in someone's voice that aren't performance. What I heard that night wasn't guilt. It was devastation. "Okay," I said. And this time okay meant something different. This time it meant, "I hear you. I believe you. I'm still here." The legal process took the rest of the year. I won't walk through all of it because some of it is still ongoing, but the summary is this. Simone was named in a civil fraud suit. Garrett was named as a co-defendant. The forensic accountant's findings were presented to the firm's partners, 2 of whom had also been defrauded without knowing it. The total damages sought in the civil case were just over $12 million when you factored in lost business, diverted commissions, and the investment losses that had resulted from misappropriated capital. Simone's lawyers negotiated. The settlement, which was finalized late last year, was just under $9 million, some of which Simone and Garrett were jointly liable for, some of which came from insurance, and a portion of which my dad was personally responsible for due to fiduciary oversight failures on his part. His portion was $4 million. He sold the house to pay it. The house he and Simone had bought together in North Hills, with the porch he'd always wanted and the yard he'd finally had time to tend. He sold it in November and moved into a rental apartment near downtown Raleigh, and when I drove over to help him unpack boxes, he looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Like the last year had taken something from him that wasn't coming back. We didn't talk about the accident. We didn't talk about the text message. We didn't talk about the 16 years of dinners twice a year and birthdays where he'd sounded like he was already somewhere else. We just unpacked boxes. I ordered pizza. He found his coffee maker in the 3rd box and made a sound of genuine relief that made me laugh for the first time in a long time. People have asked me, since all of this became something I was willing to talk about, whether I feel vindicated, whether there's satisfaction in how it turned out. I want to be honest with you. It's complicated. I did not want my dad to lose his house. I did not want to watch him sit in a half-empty apartment surrounded by boxes and look like a man who couldn't quite remember how he'd gotten there. That was not what I wanted. I don't think I wanted anything really when this started, except maybe to understand how someone could read. I've been in an accident and respond with "you'll be okay," and then go back to their closing without a second thought. I think what I understand now that I didn't understand when I was sitting in that emergency room with a broken collarbone and my brother next to me, is that my dad had spent so long building a wall between his old life and his new one that he built me out too, not with cruelty, with avoidance, with distance, with the slow, comfortable habit of not having to feel things. And Simone, whatever else she was, had made that very easy for him to do. She's gone now. The divorce was filed in July. The settlement is a separate proceeding from the criminal investigation, which is still ongoing as of the last time I checked. I have not spoken to Simone. I have nothing to say to her. Some people are not owed your words. What I keep thinking about is the moment in the hospital when I typed okay back to my dad and meant it as a closing, a door shutting quietly. I thought I was protecting myself. I thought I was letting go, but something else happened instead, because I told Kobe and Kobe told Dara at a dinner party 6 weeks later while I was still in my sling. And Dara, being Dara, filed that information away and came back to me with it when she had something real to say. I didn't plan any of this. I didn't set out to expose Simone or blow up my father's company or recover anything. I just stopped pretending that the text message was okay. I stopped giving my silence as a gift to people who had not earned it. And that, the stopping, turned out to be enough. My dad and I have dinner now. Not twice a year. More like twice a month. He asks about work and actually waits for the answer. He asked about my physical therapy and whether my shoulder still aches in the cold. It does. He said he was sorry. Not the quick sorry he used to give. The sorry that was really a subject change. He sat with it. He let it be uncomfortable. I'm not going to tell you we're fully healed. I don't think that's how it works. I think what we are is honest in a way we weren't before, and honest is a better foundation than comfortable. Kobe comes to dinner sometimes. We eat too much and argue about nothing important, and it feels, occasionally, like something I'd given up on. I didn't get my family back. I got something different, something smaller, quieter, built out of what was left after everything false had been taken away. I don't know yet if it's enough, but I chose it, eyes open, and I'd choose it again. I've thought a lot about what actually set everything in motion, not the accident. The accident was random. A truck running a red light on a rainy Tuesday, the kind of thing that happens to people every day. What set everything in motion was a text message. One sentence. You'll be okay. And the word I sent back, okay. People think justice is this loud, dramatic thing. A confrontation. A moment where you look someone in the eye and say everything you've been holding. But that's not how it worked for me. What happened was quieter than that. I stopped absorbing. I stopped making my silence a gift to someone who hadn't earned it. And that small, private decision, that one shift inside me, sent ripples outward in ways I never planned and couldn't have predicted. Simone didn't lose everything because I was angry. She lost everything because of choices she had been making for 4 years before I ever ended up in that emergency room. The accident just cracked something open. In me. In the way I saw my dad's world. In what I was willing to look at directly. The truth was already there. It just needed someone to stop looking away from it. That's the part I keep coming back to. How much of what hurts us is sustained by our own willingness to not see it clearly. I had spent years telling myself that a distant father was just a complicated father. That emotional absence was a personality type, not a choice. That I was fine, and maybe I was fine, but I was also carrying something I didn't have to carry, and I'd been so busy surviving it that I never stopped to ask whether I had to. What I know now is that the 3 things that actually got me through, the only 3 things that mattered, were not circumstances or luck. They were internal. The first was honesty with Dara, with Catherine, with myself about what I actually felt sitting in that hospital with my brother, while my dad's text sat on the tray table face down. The second was steadiness. Not rage, not a campaign, just not flinching. Looking at what was real and staying in contact with it. And the third was the willingness to let outcomes be what they were. I didn't plan for my dad to lose his house. I didn't need him to. What I needed was to stop pretending. Kobe was in that hospital room because he answered on the second ring. That's it. That's the whole thing. He made a choice in a moment, and that choice told me everything I needed to know about who he was. My dad made a choice too. A different one. And what I've learned, more than anything else this year has taught me, is that people's choices accumulate. They build something, or they erode something, slowly and without fanfare. Simone's choices built a fraud over 4 years. My dad's choices built a distance over 16. My choice. To stop swallowing that distance, to let myself take it seriously. Built something too. Something smaller, quieter, more honest than what came before. I'm still building it. I don't know what it becomes. But it's mine, and it's real. And that's more than I had when I was lying in a ditch on Highway 70 waiting for a call that didn't come.